Chapter 17, September 24, 1963. This afternoon I race home, plunk down at the kitchen table, and take out the short story called Split Cherry Tree. It looks like Mrs. Jacks copied it on the mimeograph machine about 500 years ago, so it's hard to make out all the words. The story was written by a man named Jesse Stewart. It takes place in the state of Kentucky, which, in case you're wondering, is 2 states north of here. In the story, a boy goes on a field trip to a farm where he chases a lizard up a cherry tree. Tough luck for the boy. The cherry tree breaks, so the boy's teacher makes him stay home after school for 2 hours. After school, the boy tells his teacher, "I'd rather you whip me with a switch and let me go home early. Pa will whip me anyway for going home 2 hours late." But the teacher in the store spares the rod and spoils the child. He won't whip the boy with the switch. I reckon that's why Mrs. Jacks likes this story, because as tough as she is, she's just like that teacher. She doesn't believe in paddling our behinds to teach us our lessons either. So all told, I have to say Split Cherry Tree is real good. The only bad part is I've got to copy the first 3 pages by tomorrow. Mrs. Jacks says copying stories is the best way for us to practice cursive writing and grammar. By the time I finish, my arm's asleep. But heck, I'd rather get my arm poked all over with pins and needles than get my behind whooped with a switch. While I walk over to the Tate's house, I shake my arm to get the blood back in. And wouldn't you know it, Ralphie picked today to fuss instead of sleep. As soon as I get him in the crib, I've got to use my tired old hand to run my finger back and forth across his forehead like Mama showed me. Back and forth, till I'm almost dreaming myself. But I'm not dreaming of good things. I'm dreaming a nightmare. Not a make-believe one, but a real one, also known as my life. It was 9 days ago, and just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. It was a Sunday, a couple hours after the morning service let out. The Reverend sent word calling everyone back to First Baptist. Of course, after the cross burning, there was no way in the world Mama was going to let me go to church for anything other than the morning service. So I just stayed in the yard jumping rope while everyone besides my family rushed back to church. Only a few hours later, Mama, Uncle Bump, and me were finishing up supper when someone rapped real hard on the side door. Mama opened it. There stood Delilah, looking like she'd come back from the underworld. "Sit down, honey," Mama told her. Even though it happened more than a week ago, I can see it clear like it's happening right now. Delilah standing in our doorway, Uncle Bump pulling out a kitchen chair, Mama taking Delilah by the elbow, leading her to the table. "What's the matter?" I asked. That's when Delilah spilled the awful news. There were 4 girls. They were at Sunday school, at the Negro Church in Birmingham, Alabama. They didn't do nothing wrong. They didn't do nothing. Mom and me could only guess what horror was coming next, and I reckon we were content to let Delilah keep talking in circles so we wouldn't have to hear it. But Uncle Bump went ahead and asked, "What happened, Delilah?" "Someone bombed the church. Now they're dead." Dead. Delilah buried her face in her hands and bawled, while questions fell all over me. What did those girls ever do to deserve this? Were those girls just like Delilah and me? Will we get killed too? I was sure I'd upchuck. Mama's eyes filled. "That's terrible, just terrible," she said. And then she thought on it another second and said, "But you know, girls, that was all the way over in Alabama." Mama said Alabama was next to Japan, but I know my map, and that state's right next to Mississippi. Right next to here. Mama stood, wiped her hands on her apron. "Well, I'm going to strike a match and bake some snickerdoodles. You girls want to help?" Delilah and me both said no. Did Mama just think baking cookies would make us forget what we just heard? Delilah and me dragged ourselves outside to sit on the swing. Ever since we heard the awful news, I try to play more with Ralphie, because when I'm with him, I can almost forget about those 4 girls, and I can almost forget about my brother a couple minutes in a row. Now I look down at Ralphie. I'm still running my weary finger across his brow, glad he doesn't hate me yet. But I know one day his daddy will teach him to, so I try to fix it in my mind how Ralphie is right now. How innocent, how sweet. But the second I get a good look at him, I see his cheeks, they're bright red. I feel his forehead with the back of my hand. He's warm. Then Ralphie moans. I'm not sure what to do. What if he's caught a bug? What if he's got a fever? I couldn't stand the sight of him sweating and groaning, so I run to find Mama to ask if she thinks Ralphie's all right. I rush to the sitting room and to the Tate's bedroom, only to find Mrs. Tate at her desk, a pen in her hand, a stack of envelopes at her side. She wipes her fingers under her eyes. "Sorry, ma'am," I say. "I thought it was Mama in here changing the linens." "She's out back hanging laundry," Mrs. Tate says, her voice scratchy. A tear rose down her cheek. "Ma'am," I say, and I reckon it's best to just find Mama and ask her about Ralphie, because Mrs. Tate doesn't look like she needs trouble. I'm about to dash downstairs and out to the backyard when I hear the sitting room door creak open. "Where are you, Penelope?" Mr. Tate sounds. And wouldn't you know it, here I am, stuck in the bedroom, frozen solid, while Mrs. Tate gasps. At first I think it's because she's surprised as I am to find that man home in the early afternoon when he's supposed to be on the road selling seeds. But that's not the half of it, because the next thing I know, Mrs. Tate hurries over the bookshelf and pulls out a book. But when she opens it up, it's not a book at all. It doesn't have any pages inside. It's an empty box. Mrs. Tate shoves her envelopes into the box, and she's sliding the box back onto the shelf when that good-for-nothing husband of hers stomps into the room. He slams his spitting glass down on the bedside table. Then he takes one look at me and shouts, "What's this dish rag doing in our bedroom?" My heart pounds. I fix my eyes on the floor like I'm supposed to, and that's when I see it. One of Mrs. Tate's secret envelopes, it's fallen smack in the middle of the carpet. When Mr. Tate bends over to spit his chewing tobacco into the glass, he spots the secret envelope too. He reaches down to pick it up. But I don't know what gets into me. I scoop it up first. Sorry, ma'am, I said. Must have dropped your letter. I'll take it to the post office. Then I hurry out the bedroom, through the sitting room, and down the hallway with my fingers. They dance all over that envelope. In my breath, it rattles around in my chest. Somehow I get to Ralphie's room. I turn the envelope over in my hands and see it's addressed to J.D. Foster, New Orleans, Louisiana. Who on earth that is, I've got no idea. I'd sure like to find out. But seeing as reading this letter would get me fired or worse, I decided to check on Ralphie instead. He's quiet. His forehead is dry and cool, and I reckon maybe he had his stomach upset is all. Well, I've sure got one too, because here I am holding this secret letter, and now I hear footsteps. Faster than a duck and dunk, I hid that letter under Ralphie's crib mattress. Sorry about my husband, Mrs. Tate says, stepping into Ralphie's bedroom. He doesn't mean anything by it. Yes, ma'am, I said. But I want you to know, Addie Ann, those letters, they're nothing. Yes, ma'am, I say. Then that husband of hers yells from downstairs. Tonight I want my dinner hot. Mrs. Tate sighs, and no one has to tell me she's sick and tired of that man. Why, he's meaner than a junkyard dog. Still, she rushes out of the room to the top of the stairs and calls down, Yes, dear. After the front door slams shut, Mrs. Tate hurries back to her son's room. I can see by the squint in her eyes she's wondering if I read her secret letter or not, so I dip my hand back under the crib mattress and fish around till my thumb bangs into a pointed corner of the envelope. Then I pull the letter out and hand it over. Well, no use sticking around. I pick up the laundry basket, but just as I grab the doorknob, Mrs. Tate tells me to put the basket down. Have a seat, she says, in the rocking chair. She's got her letter back, so I can't imagine what else she wants, and it feels awful backward to have her standing in front of me while I'm sitting down like I'm on the throne. The thing is, Addie Ann, she whispers, her voice in a pinch, those letters in the book. What book, Mrs. Tate? I ask. My mama didn't raise no stupid fool. I know when to keep my mouth shut. Well, I'm just writing my childhood friend J.D. Foster, she says. Okay, ma'am, I say. But I must be looking at her funny because then she says, oh, I just hide the letters in a box because my husband don't like J.D. Never did. So do me a favor, Addie Ann, and keep this our little secret. I wouldn't want it getting back to Mr. Tate. All of a sudden, I've got to go to the bathroom real bad. I'll tell you what, she says. I press my legs together. Then I pray Ralphie will wake up and give out a good scream so I can get on out of here. But when you know it, he must feel a whole lot better because his little tummy goes up and down in gentle waves. I've been so lonely with my husband gone selling seed and stod to dusk, and J.D. is the only one who would truly understand. The problem is J.D. moved to Louisiana last year and I ain't got the address, so I'm just saving all my letters inside the book box till I find out where J.D. is. Mrs. Tate's crying, so I tell her, well, of course you keep your letters in the book box, ma'am. It's the right thing to do. She sniffles. The right thing, I say, and hand her a cloth diaper so she can wipe her eyes. At long last, Mrs. Tate gets a hold of herself. Now, I know you're a good girl, so don't let me hear you've gone and told your mama or anyone else about this. I don't want trouble, she said. I don't want trouble neither, ma'am, I say. By the time I get home and make it all the way through dinner, I can't think of anything else but Mrs. Tate's secret. I'm lying in bed and her secret's blowing up like a balloon inside my chest. I can't help but wonder what J.D. looks like. Does she wear a silly hat with plastic fruit on the brim or a pretty one with a white bow? I dance into the kitchen where Mama's cleaning up. Why aren't you sleeping? She asks me. Something juicy, I said. What's that? Mama dries the lid off a pot. Oh, you'll want to sit down for this one, I say. All right. I can tell Mama's trying not to act overinterested, but I know she is because she dries the pot lid handle over and over again. After I cross my fingers under a table, I say, it's like this. Then I change the story just to a drip drop to fix the part about me busting into the Tate's bedroom without rapping on the door. I knocked and Mrs. Tate told me to come on in. She was sitting at her desk writing her letter, I say. Yes, said Mama. Well, Mrs. Tate's envelope fell on the floor just as Mr. Tate stormed in. When he bent over to spit his tobacco in a glass, Mrs. Tate pointed to the envelope on the floor like I should pick it up. Far be it from me to tell Mama I volunteered myself into this whole mess. Then Mrs. Tate shooed me out the door, so I went to check on Ralphie. Don't sound unusual, Mama says. That Mr. Tate's a mean skunk. But then I tell Mama all about how Mrs. Tate let me sit in the rocking chair while she carried on about how lonely she is, and how J.D. is the only one in the whole world who truly understands her. No doubt she writes all about what she thinks of her husband in those letters to J.D. Mama sits at a kitchen table and listens cotton-eyed while I describe the secret book box. By the time I'm through, Mama's got worried teardrops in her eyes, and I just know if those tears fall down her cheeks into her mouth, they'll taste like bitter horseradish. She cuts her eyes at me real mean. Telling someone's secret is just like telling a lie, she said. You told me. That's bad enough. The balloon blowing up in my chest, it sinks. What? I ask. I'm more than a little confused because from all my experience, when someone keeps a secret, they're keeping the truth from getting out. So telling a secret's like spreading around the truth. What could be wrong with that? But I reckon Mama doesn't see it that way because she says, if you say one word of this to anyone, and Delilah included, I'm going to send that cow of yours to live with Aunt Adelaide up in Baton Rouge. She leans forward, reaches across the table, and lifts my chin with her finger. I'll take that scoundrel there myself. After I get in bed, I tweet, click, click, and Flapjack pounces through the open window. I snuggle up with him under the sheet, but I don't bother to scare him with what Mama said. He's got nothing to worry about. I'm not going to tell a soul. Chapter 18, September 28, 1963. I've gone 3.5 days without telling Mrs. Tate's secret to anyone. I'm sitting on my swing, thinking about how much I've matured, when Uncle Bump moseys out of his shed and asks me to join him fishing down the bayou. It's being Saturday. I tell Uncle Bump I can't see why not. I've already calculated 22 fractions, including improper ones, and I've learned my Latin roots, like vis, which means to see. As soon as I change into my dress, out of my dress into my t-shirt and jeans, Uncle Bump and me set off for the river. He carries 2 poles and a jar of worms. Of course, I haven't been fishing in years, so I forgot how disgusting the whole thing will be. When we get to the bank, I get a sick feeling because I've seen some catfish and they're bigger than cats. I don't want to kill no catfish. We're just going to catch them baby ones, Uncle Bump says, but I don't want to kill no babies either. Still, I can tell Uncle Bump's glad for the company. He's all about showing me the night crawlers. They're wiggling inside the glass jar. He pulls out one of the worms, stabs it with the metal hook, then ties the hook to the line and casts the line into the water. Then he hands me the pole and fixes up his own. Once Uncle Bub and me are standing on the bank holding our poles, there are no worms to look at, and I like it better. We stare out at the river without a pull in our lines, while the fall wind sends ripples across the water, making it look rough and wild. And I reckon I get to thinking about things besides fish, because soon I let out a sigh loud enough for Uncle Bump to hear. What's wrong? He asks. Nothing. That ain't a nothing kind of sigh, he says. Between you and me, I think your brother will be back. The dandelion sun pinks out from behind the cottony clouds, so no Uncle Bump hasn't given up makes me weak all over. Uncle Bump tells me whenever he goes to work at the general merchandise store in Frankendale, he stops to talk to my brother's friends who live nearby. He also sent another letter to Aunt Adelaide up in Baton Rouge and spent a pile of change at the pay telephone booth to see if any of the civil rights group had word. It's tough, Uncle Bump says, but no one's heard a thing. I stare out at the water 2 more minutes before I'm ready to talk. Truth be told, I tell Uncle Bump most 12-year-old girls won't tell their mamas. I can say anything, and I know he won't get worried or mad. Sure, I got some hope from Delilah's ghost ceremony, but some days I can't help it. My faith dwindles to a drop. It's hard to keep believing, I say. Uncle Bump wraps an arm around my shoulders, pulls me close, and I'm more than grateful he's by my side. Staring out at the water, I can't help but picture the bayou, Buck Fowler, my brother's sneaker. But I don't want to think about it anymore, so I do like Mom and switch the subject. When you were my age, did you ever I asked. Well, sure I did, Uncle Bump tugs on his pole and lowers the line. Who? I ask. Who what? Who'd you love? Oh, Uncle Bump says. Love my mama, love my papa, love my sister, even love that old man across the tracks. Not that way, I said. Ouch, Uncle Bump tries to pick a splinter out of his thumb. Well, who do you love? I asked. But he's silent like God cut off the supply of nouns, verbs, and adjectives in his throat. It's not a big deal, I tell him, even though it's a huge one. That's because everyone has the kind of love I want. Sure, I'm only in 7th grade, but that kind of love is all stocked up in my heart. Maybe I don't know how to act with a boy. Maybe I don't know how to dress or what to say, which is bad enough. But what makes it 85 bushels worse is that Delilah always wears the perfect dress and says, thrills, chills, and charges at the exact right time. So any boy I loves her instead. Seems something's particular is on your mind, Uncle Bump says. I nod, but I won't look in his eyes. I don't want him to see all the pain whirling in mine. I fix my gaze in the swirling water. Cool breeze, he asks. I swallow. I was going to tell him, but it would have taken hours to get there. Uncle Bump nods. He knew it all along. He's everything, I say. Ain't that something? I've never met a person who was everything. Well, I have it, I say. It's not just that Cool Breeze is the only other student from Cuckoo going to 7th grade, but he can run a mile in 4 minutes, 59 seconds flat. Not to mention he has the cutest dimples, and he can solve equations faster than Mrs. Jacks can write them on the board. Thing is, I say, he'll always like Delilah. Then I think about my Latin root and say, to him I'm just invisible. Why is that? Uncle Bump asks. Tears sting the back of my throat. I swipe under my nose, but it doesn't work, because a couple of them fall right down my face. Every boy likes Delilah. Nothing ever changes, I say. That's right, Uncle Bump says. Nothing does change. My breath is high in my chest running. I can't believe he agrees. The future's stacking up in front of me, day after day of the same thing. Nothing changes. Me and Cool Breeze walking to school, back and forth to Cuckoo to Weaver, 3 whole miles in each direction, the 2 of us together with nothing to say. Cool Breeze not even knowing I'm there. Except for one thing, Uncle Bump says. I wait for him to say what that is, the one thing. But when you know it, his fishing pole bends. He yanks hard to pull in the line. Right now I don't care about catfish. I want to know what's the one thing that'll change. What is it, I ask. Uncle Bump doesn't hear me. He's too busy breaking out a smile bigger than the Magnolia State. That's because he's got a catfish huge as a dog on the line. When he gets it onto the bank, I can see it's got whiskers. What's the one thing? I ask again. Then I turn away, my back to Uncle Bump and that fish, because I don't want to see the part that comes next, the part where the poor fish thrashes on the bank and Uncle Bump helps it to his death. After he packs up the dead catfish and the live night crawlers, we walk back and Uncle Bump asks, if you ain't got the belly to fish, then why'd you eat it? And I can't answer that question straight, because I like to smoke Delta catfish with brown sugar much as anyone. It's not till we get all the way home I ask him to tell me once and for all, what's the one thing that'll change? What's the one thing that'll break me out of this dreadful existence? You, he says. Then he sets to work building a fire to smoke that catfish. Later, after I swallow the last bite and lick the brown sugar off my fingers, I'm still wondering just what he means.